Welcome to Alley Chats. Today I have a really special guest. You guys don't know this, but I've been talking to him for 15 minutes already, and I just wanted to continue the conversation with you included. I've got author Chris Babu. Chris, thank you so much for being on Alley Chats.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. And you know what? The audience might not know who you are. Hopefully some of them out there do. But if not, this is their chance to meet you. Tell them about yourself.
Thank you very much. So I'm Chris Babu. I'm an author of young adult books, young adult science fiction primarily. I am a full-time writer. I live in Eastern Long Island with my wife and daughter. I'm 45. I didn't start writing until I was 40 years old, or writing seriously until I was 40. Before that, I worked in finance for 20 years. And, you know, my background in is a little bit non-traditional for an author. I didn't major in English. I didn't work in publishing or as a journalist. I went to MIT and I majored in math. So I sort of caught the writing bug a little bit late. But I originally started writing actually as a stress reliever, right? Because in 2015 or something, when I sort of started writing, it was a stressful time for me at work, and I found that writing was just a great stress reliever. So and I actually wrote The Initiation, which is my debut book, while I was working on Wall Street. I was writing it at night. I was writing it on the subway. I was in New York City. And that's how I got my start. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so I quit my job and I started writing full time.
It's interesting. I know that The Initiation has the whole subway thing going on in it, and that you were sitting on a subway getting this idea. It reminds me of Clive Barker when he wrote Midnight Meat Train, and it was just from sitting on a subway and going, here's what happened. I have a story about that too with him, where he was in a cab. I believe this is correct. And he had to drive through Cabrini Green, and he got stopped right at this intersection. And it's an intersection I was by 1,000 times that had this weird bathroom outside that was frightening as hell. And in his head, he saw that and went, what if there was an urban legend in there? And that's where he wrote Candyman. So it's interesting that those environments can create these other like really creative stories. So
at a high level, one of the things The Initiation is about a journey through the subway tunnels in near future New York City. They're abandoned. And that the route that the characters take in the story, without giving too much away, is between West 72nd Street on the Upper West Side down to Wall Street. And that is the route that I took to work every day. And so it's not a coincidence that I wrote a story about a hellish journey through the subway system on the route that I took for 20 years. Because anyone that's ever lived in New York City knows like the specific hell of commuting on the subway in New York City, even pre-COVID especially.
Yeah, man. I'm sure there are elements of your experience that came in there too, of people and things you saw that just like, yeah, this is what makes it a hellscape.
Exactly.
So tell people what your book series is actually about. Oh, and before we go any further, I want the audience to know, and I want you to know, if you hear like crazy screaming in the background, we've got my niece's daughter here who's 2.5. So you want a quiet environment, it's not going to happen. So
I did hear crazy screaming, and I didn't want to ask you what it was.
That's what it is. So Chris, go ahead. Let's hear, what's your book series about?
Yeah, so the Initiation series is YA dystopian science fiction, sort of in the spirit of the Hunger Games or the Maze Runner, the really popular books of like 2010 to 2013 that were a big inspiration for the series. And basically the story follows a 16-year-old math geek named Drayden living in near future New York City, which is now quarantined and walled in, called New America, as a result of a global pandemic and riots over inequality that were quelled by the National Guard. So just as even though this book was published, the first book in the series was published 2 years ago, it happens to mirror a lot of what's going on.
I would say pretty timely right now.
Yeah, very timely. Yeah, exactly. So, as far as they know, they're the only people remaining in the world. Since inequality was one of the things that destroyed the world, it's based on equality for all on the surface, but it's a much darker place than it seems. So when Drayden's mother is mysteriously cast out of the city, he begins looking into it, and he uncovers a dark secret. Everybody there is in danger. The only way to protect himself and the rest of his family is to enter the Initiation, which is a test that takes place in the abandoned subway tunnels. It's only available to kids just graduating high school. It's optional, and it offers one winner the chance to join the government and move to their zone, which is the only safe one in the city. but failing it means exile, which means death. So Drayden enters along with 5 other teenagers, and the story, follows his journey through the tunnels, where the test involves like grueling physical trials and brainy puzzles like riddles and brain teasers. So, as the reader, if you're so inclined, you can try and solve the same puzzles and brain teasers that the characters encounter to see if you would have passed the initiation, which makes the book a little interactive, I guess you could say. And then the rest of the series, the Expedition, takes the characters on a journey outside the walls of New America, where you sort of find out really what's going on, and there are a lot of surprises there. And the Insurrection, which just came out, follows the characters back to New America, where, I don't want to give too much away, but a big battle ensues, truth versus lies, the whole bit. So it's sort of, it's 3 separate books that each have a beginning and end, but it's also one continuous story, sort of a la Lord of the Rings.
Well, I know that Molly was reading them here, and her reaction when she got to the end of the first book was, "Oh my God, did they send the second book?" So I have a feeling that you've captured that. You mentioned like Hunger Games, and you mentioned Maze Runner.
Yes,
I read those. As I got to the end of those, it was like I don't know what I would have done if I had to wait. You know what I mean?
So I did the same thing. I read them after all 3 was out. Yeah, good. It's good to hear. Yeah, so, I mean, I love those books.
Are you done with that universe after book 3, or have you thought about going back to it? Is there another story there, or are you going on?
So I am officially done with it after the Insurrection, which came out right before coronavirus. However, I will say I left the slightest window open if there's demand for another book. So it could potentially have a 4th book or have a prequel. But at the moment, I've written another book in a completely different world. So that's sort of my focus right now.
Cool. Something to look forward to. So you do have other products coming out. Are there any other like projects or anything that you are involved with?
So this new book, which is YA paranormal science fiction, and paranormal not in the ghost sense, but in the psychic ability sense. So the book that I've written is, I would sort of describe as Stranger Things meets Jason Bourne. So it's a little bit of a thriller, but with a huge psychic element to it. It actually takes off. Are you familiar with the Stargate project?
Absolutely.
Right. So it takes off sort of, Stargate project took place between the mid 70s to the mid 90s. The U.S. Army recruited people to remote view, which is sort of like applied clairvoyance. Secret targets, and they train them as these sort of psychic spies. And one of the interesting things about it is that they took people that didn't show any psychic ability before they entered the project, and they trained them to be psychic, which is I found fascinating. And this stuff was all declassified in the last sort of year or two. And so my new book, a lot of people believe that even though the Stargate project was shut down in 1995, it really wasn't, and that it was just sort of taken more underground. It was too well known. A lot of people in Congress didn't approve of a psychic spy program because they thought it was hogwash. So my book sort of takes off where Project Stargate ends. And so that's what I'm working on right now.
Chris, I can't wait to read that. I'm all about that stuff. My dad actually took the remote viewing classes. I can't think of his name, but the guy who started that taught classes
Ingo Swann?
Here. Which one?
Ingo Swann.
I know the name. I don't know if that was the guy. Oh,
okay.
God, I can't remember. I know Ingo Swann. I've read a bunch of books on it. My dad took the classes, and then he ended up saying that he had a group and they would do these things. And he said, yeah, you don't see things. You don't go like, here, they give you numbers and coordinates, and it's kind of this weird thing.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, everybody starts seeing things, and you piece a story together out of that. And he would say it was interesting. There might be, 5 people in the room, and 5 people completely separate would talk about this refrigerator. It'd be like,
it's fascinating. It's hard to understand how it's possible, but it does work. And the reality is anybody can remote view.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I read a book, a guy that claimed he remote viewed, and it was so fascinating until he got to this point when I'm like, okay, you're making this stuff up. He just completely went off the rails. It was like, man, you had a good narrative going, man. I think he got too excited. And then all of a sudden it was like, every Star Trek episode was produced by aliens, and Jesus told me in one of my remote views, and you're like, that's not how it works. It was crazy.
Right, exactly.
But he got my money. I mean, I read the book. So you've got that project to look forward to. Now, do you do anything with like Patreon or anything? Do you have a way that people can support you as an author?
I don't. I don't use Patreon. If anybody wants to support me as an author, I would just please ask to read my books. Read the Initiation series. Even if you don't buy it, if you just read it from the library. If you enjoy the book, maybe tell a friend about it or leave a review. Reviews are huge. Amazon, Goodreads. Even if it's a bad review, it doesn't matter. Reviews are great. So that's and of course, following me on social media would be really helpful, especially in this sort of day and age. As you know, we can't have cons. I do a lot of speaking at schools and libraries and bookstores, and all that's been canceled. So, trying to do everything online now, trying to, maybe put some more stuff out on social media. I actually do run a lot of, so since, a main theme throughout the Initiation series is problem solving. I do run contests on my social media, where sometimes you have to solve a brain teaser or decode a message. And I give away prizes, and, they're not like, a bookmark. They're usually like a gift card, something like that. So, I think that's kind of a fun thing that usually gets huge participation. I think not just because people want to win the prize, but because it's fun to do stuff like that,
Yeah, absolutely. Interaction is the way to go. So we will put your social media in all the show notes here, but do you want to give a couple of your places you're most active out?
Yeah, so Instagram is the place that I sort of focus the most. My handle is Real Chris Babu. My handle is the same on all social media. So Real Chris Babu on Instagram, also on Facebook, also on Twitter. I'm not advanced or cool enough to be on Snapchat. I haven't figured out how to use it yet. And I'm not on TikTok, but mostly on Instagram, I think is the place where I tend to do the most and talk about the most, like what's going on, what I'm working on, run contests, things like that. So, I'd love if people check me out there.
All right, here's the big question. This is your dream con. Who would you be most excited to meet?
I was thinking about this, and it's so hard to come up with one person. Now, by the way, if we're talking of all time, like Dead or Alive, which
I don't have any rules on this thing, man.
There's no rules, but I'm going to do a Dead or Alive version and then a live version. So Dead or Alive, I would say Isaac Asimov, because I would want to probe that brain and find out what was going on. And he's sort of probably, I think most people's favorite science fiction author. And he certainly is mine. And I'd love to have a conversation or just say hello or get an autograph like a Stan. But if I had to pick a real person in today's world, I'd probably pick Rick Riordan. So I love his writing. I fancy myself as having my own writing style, of course, like every author. But if there's one writer whose writing I emulate the most, it's probably his. I love the way he writes. I love his storytelling. Writing and storytelling are related, but sort of distinct skills, right? You find some people who are brilliant, gorgeous prose, but not great storytellers, and vice versa. We all know of authors who are, fancy themselves as storytellers, but aren't great writers. And I feel like he sort of maximizes both. He's an amazing storyteller. I love the simplicity of his prose. So I'm just a huge, huge fan of that guy. I've never met him. And I would be waiting in line, overnight if he was going to be there at a con.
That's a great answer, man. Molly, my daughter, she was one of them. She started reading his, was it Titan's Curse or whatever? Started with that. She started with that series, and it was, she couldn't put it down. I mean, she just rolled right through it. And then she ended up playing a character in a live stage version of one of them. And then she didn't love the movies, but she's excited. I guess there's a Netflix series coming, and she's like, they're going to get it right. They're going to do this right. So
they'll get it right. And he'll be, I believe he's going to be involved in it, which is key, right? Because he's the one that's going to make it good. If someone just takes it and adapts it without his participation, you're going to get a lot of the bad Stephen King movies where he wasn't involved in the production. But yeah, that's key. So
he wasn't involved in The Shining, and that was a hell of a movie.
I thought it was a great movie. The funny thing about that, right, is he hates it. He hates it. He thought it was, which I thought was funny. Have you seen
the one that he approves of, the TV version with Steven Weber?
I did. And it's okay. It's okay. I didn't think it was anywhere nearly as good as Stanley Kubrick's version, not even close.
I think what you really have there, it's probably not that he thinks it's a bad movie. It's that it's not his movie. It's not. It's Kubrick's vision of that story. And I think that's why he ripples, because it's but you're missing these things that I put in there. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's a masterpiece.
It is. It is a masterpiece, and it does deviate from the book quite a bit. But it's one of the rare movies that I feel is at least as good as the book.
Yeah,
it rarely happens.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So, okay, we've got your social media out there. We know what you've got going on. What's the name of the new book again?
So the new book doesn't have a title yet.
No, not that one. The one that just came out.
Oh, the one that came out is called The Insurrection. Yeah. So we have The Initiation, The Expedition, and The Insurrection. The Insurrection just came out. Now, by the way, my books can be read as standalones. Some people just jump right into book 3. It absolutely can. Like, I make sure that I give you all the backstory that you possibly need to understand the context of the story and what's happened in the prior books. So you can read the books as standalones. If you always want to jump into book 3, which is probably the most action-packed of the 3 books, you can do that. However, I think like we've all read, like you could do the same thing with, Harry Potter as well, right? You can jump in the middle of the series, but it always feels like you're missing out on something a little bit.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, exactly. So you can do it. I would recommend reading the books in order, but it is possible to read them. However, The Insurrection just came out. In my opinion, it's my favorite of the 3 books. I think a lot of people love The Initiation the best because it's the first one. And I think, I think it's one of the things that makes my series a little bit unique is that most series kind of fall apart by book 3, right? Like the first book's great, the second book's okay, and the third book's terrible. That's my experience as a reader, generally speaking, reading trilogies. And it's not a surprise because, the way that people publish a series typically is they write the first book. If it's good and it gets picked up and it gets published, then they write the other books in the series.
Right.
And if it doesn't, they abandon the project. And I wrote the first 2 books before the first book was even published, and I outlined the third one before the first one was published. So, the difference there is that you can't edit a published book, right? So, if you have a story that's already out there, you can't go back and change anything in the first book that you might need in the third book. And so you can kind of get boxed into a storyline. And so anyway, what I was really, really intent on is making sure that the 3 books together were a cohesive story that got more complex and interesting and not more ridiculous and horrible. So anyway, I'm really proud of the series. I'm really proud of book 3. You should. And I would love for people to read it.
It's and let me know really exciting. And I'm finishing up. So after I finish my master's program, it's tough to read a book. Your brain gets a little mushy for a while. I'm finally back. And what do? I pick up Shannara. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be reading forever. So I swear, as soon as I finish Shannara, I'm going to pick up Initiation, and I'm going to go through that. It's not going to be, this Shannara book, I'm just in love with it, but I'm like, my God, 700 pages. I feel like I've been reading for months.
It's really long.
And I'm not even there. Book, yeah, but it's so good.
It's a great book. It's an awesome book. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth it. Worth the 700 pages.
So everybody, I put Chris's info in the show notes. He gave it live on here. Follow him, buy his books, and if nothing else, just like we say with the podcast, give him reviews. It truly helps. The other thing you can do is if you like what he said here, even if you haven't read the books, share the interview and share his stuff out there. Like, hey, here's a great book series you might want to check out. It doesn't matter if it's a kid or not. I mean, your stuff is YA, but we're adults loving this stuff. If it's somebody who has a sense of adventure and wants something really cool, if they liked the Hunger Games, this is a layup. So, Chris, I'm just so honored you came on. Thank you so much, and I'll want to have you back on when this new book that is unnamed comes out. Maybe we'll do a special episode just talking conspiracy theories.
Oh, I could talk about that all day long. I appreciate it. Rob, I really appreciate having me on. It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and thank you so much for your support.
You bet, man. Thanks, Chris.
You can find Alley Chats on Facebook by searching for @AlleyChats. You can also visit us at our webpage, smgpods.com/alleychats, for links to all our episodes and other cool stuff. One easy way to support our show is to rate and review Alley Chats wherever you listen to your podcasts. Those ratings really help us out and help others find our show as well. Alley Chats is produced and edited by Rob Southgate for Southgate Media Group. Be sure to subscribe to Alley Chats because you definitely don't want to miss an episode. Thanks again to our affiliate sponsors, Hunt-A-Killer and Tweaked Audio. Links to them are on our webpage and in the show notes. This wouldn't be possible without them. Our theme song is by Benny and the No Goods. Check out their awesome music at bennyandthenogoods.bandcamp.com. If you're an artist or writer or creative type that would have a table at an artist alley, and would like to be on Alley Chats, message us through the Facebook page or email us directly at southgatemediagroup@gmail.com and we'll set up an interview. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with another fantastic show.